Seconds? Okay. It is moved by the Honourable Senator Ousakos, seconded by the Honourable Senator McFedrin. On debate, Senator Ousakos.
Thank you, honourable colleagues. I've made more references in this chamber than I can remember about this chamber being an independent House of Parliament and how we must operate independently from the other place. And while I will always fiercely defend that principle, which is at the core of our Westminster system, over the past 150 plus years, our two chambers have often demonstrated a will and an ability to work together for the greater good. There are moments in our history where we have come together to speak in one singular, powerful voice. And now we have before us another one of those moments. We have an opportunity right now to come together, like we did earlier on motion item number 4, to stand together, to stand on principle, to be on the right side of history. We have seen it time and again throughout history. Around the world, people turn away, sometimes inadvertently, other times on purpose. They turn away from the atrocities being committed against their fellow men and women. It's not always easy to speak up, to speak out. The reasons can be many, but speaking up, speaking out is the right thing to do. And it is what we, as senators, as parliamentarians, but most and above all as Canadians, we must speak on behalf of our nation and our people. We must represent the fabric of our nation, our values, and we must do so as one solid parliamentary voice. That's why this motion is the same motion that was recently adopted in the House of Commons. And if adopted here, it can truly be said that Canada's Parliament has spoken and has declared what is happening to minority Muslims in Xinjiang region as a genocide. I believe the seriousness and egregious character of what's happening to Uyghur Muslims and others in mainland China is reflected in the fact that senators from all caucuses and groups have sought to draw attention to what's happening and have been so willing to work across party lines in bringing this motion forward. I wish to extend my thanks to my caucus colleague, Senator No, who worked with me on the motion in the last Parliament calling for Magnitsky sanctions against Chinese officials related to this genocide, and thank him for his steadfast support when it comes to human rights. I also would like to thank Senator McFedrin for her outreach on this matter and for agreeing to second this motion, and also being a steadfast supporter of human rights anywhere and all the time. To my good friend, Senator Jaffer, who also expressed her unreserved support, thank you for always being on the right side of history, Senator. Also, Senator, I'd like to thank Senator Munson. I'd like to thank Senator Julie Melville-Duchesne for her unequivocal support. I also want to thank each and every one of you in this chamber that know that we as Canadians have to stand on the right side of these issues. The point is, this transcends politics and political agendas. Colleagues, I do agree with those who call for exercising caution where the use of the word genocide is concerned. It is not something to be thrown around lightly. It does come with certain legal implications for the international community. So we should turn, I think, to the 1948 Genocide Convention for guidance when considering whether particular actions constitute a genocide. In the present convention, genocide is defined as any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. As such, A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of that group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. The 1948 Convention is focused on acts designed to physically destroy a particular group. Since the Convention was formulated in the aftermath of the Holocaust in Europe, there's no doubt as to the context in which the Convention was drafted. There should also be no doubt that what is taking place against minority Muslims in Xinjiang at the hands of the communist Chinese regime is in fact and undoubtedly a genocide. In order to truly appreciate the scope of what's happening, we must go back where it began, starting by noting that the region China refers to as Xinjiang is actually Chinese-occupied East Turkestan. The region, as with all of China, is made up predominantly of Han Chinese, with Uyghur Muslims in the minority. Over the years, an influx of Uyghur Muslims from the regions west into the bustling manufacturing centers of the south has created increasing ethnic tension. These tensions have boiled over throughout the years, sometimes resulting in violent protests. It was against this backdrop, according to documents obtained by the New York Post, that in 2014, President Xi Jinping launched the full force of China's authoritarian regime against the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in the region. Xi has justified his actions then and since as being necessary to deal with who he describes as terrorists. So what does that look like, colleagues? Chinese authorities immediately started rounding up, grabbing them off the streets, snatching them out of their homes, telling family members, including young children, that their loved ones were being sent to training schools, that they might never come back. And while at first the Chinese government denied the existence of these internment camps, when confronted with satellite imagery proving their existence, they referred to them, and I quote, as re-education camps. And even now, Chinese officials try to claim that everyone has completed their training and have been released. But satellite images and family members of those interned say quite the contrary. And what is really happening at these camps, colleagues? Prisoners are subjected to psychological indoctrination, physical torture, including waterboarding, sexual abuse, forced abortions, mass sterilization. There's said to be as many as 300 of these internment camps, averaging 300 acres in size, with many showing signs of expansion over the past year or so. It is believed that as many as 3 million people, or 30% of the Uyghur population, are detained in these concentration camps. And Uyghurs outside the camps are also victims of oppression and forced labor. A report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute found that these forced laborers have been working for companies owned by BMW, Nike, Huawei, just to name a few. The threat of being interned for even the slightest infraction is said to have terrorized the entire population into silence. As reported by the BBC, the region is now covered by what is termed a pervasive network of surveillance, including police checkpoints, cameras that scan everything from license plates to individual faces, their expressions, and even discussions amongst these citizens. Cameras are even said to have been located and monitoring individuals in their apartments and homes. And it's not just facial recognition technology that's being used, but also other biometric data, including DNA and voice recognition, with Uyghurs being forced to turn over samples of these to local authorities, as well as being forced to install tracking apps on their mobile devices. This Orwellian level of surveillance has been complemented by a reported campaign of forced sterilization here as well. Documents obtained by the House of Commons Subcommittee on International Human Rights noted about 80% of all IDU placements in China took place in this region. Placements in China took place in this region. Birth rates in the region are reported to have fallen by close to 24% over the last year. And then there are the settlement policies that have sought to swamp the local Uyghur population with large numbers of Han Chinese who have been encouraged to settle in these regions. Colleagues, it is indisputable that this does rise to the level of genocide according to the 1948 Convention. And yet, the communist regime of China not only expects us to believe otherwise, but they continue a campaign of threats and intimidation against Western nations who dare challenge them. In some cases, some countries have been complicit in Beijing's attempts to wipe out the Uyghur population by arresting exiled Uyghurs and deporting them back to China. We should be under no illusion that the Xi regime seeks to silence us as well. They've threatened us. They've threatened our colleagues in Parliament with repercussions in the past. But colleagues, we must not allow that to deter us. It certainly hasn't deterred our greatest ally, the United States of America. Several months ago, the United States Senate introduced a bipartisan resolution to hold China accountable for genocide against ethnic Uyghurs, ethnic Kazakhs, and members of our Muslim minority groups, other Muslim minority groups. Two successive administrations, including the current one, as both the current Secretary of State and current Secretary of State have recognized that the actions of the Chinese regime constitute a genocide. And it is happening in full view of the world. The authoritarian state of China is committing these atrocities, these crimes against humanity without impunity. They're arrogant in their blatant disregard for human life and human rights. And we must not allow it to go unchecked and to go unnamed for what it is. We always say, never again. We said it after the Holocaust. And then we had Rwanda, a genocide that had such a profound impact on our friend and former colleague, the Honorable Romeo Dallaire. Former Senator Dallaire has said of what's happening in China, and I quote, "You're either a great nation that believes in its values and what its flag stands for, or what so many have died to defend it. You're either that or you're not." And I couldn't agree more with our former colleague, Senator Dallaire. We can't say we're a nation that defends human rights and religious freedom and then stay silent when we see what's happening in China. We can't stand up against Islamophobia in this country, but not stand up and speak out against the genocide taking place against Muslim people in another. This is not the Canadian way. Never in our history has a nation have we backed down in the face of tyranny, and we shouldn't start now. Our actions as Canadians, ours today as parliamentarians, must be reflective of our values and our long-standing reputation of defenders of human rights, religious freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. We must speak out in one voice and say, no, we will not allow this to happen. Never again. Colleagues, China for far too long, this Chinese regime, has trampled freedom and democracy in Hong Kong with a boot to the throat of the people of Hong Kong. We've seen how they behave in terms of disregarding international law in regards to our two Michaels and other Canadian citizens. We've seen how they've been belligerent when it comes to attacking countries and neighbors like Taiwan and India. We need to speak up. We need to hold China to account. We should not be tolerant of a trading ally of behavior that we would never accept in our own country and as Canadians. I hope you will all support this motion. It's taken far too long for such an obvious motion that embodies what Canada is all about and what Canadians believe in, standing up for fellow man who's being trampled by tyranny and by an authoritarian regime. So I don't know what are the forces that are preventing this obvious call on behalf of my colleagues to speak up on behalf of Canadians, but we have an opportunity tonight to speak in one solid voice, to reinforce the House of Commons, to reinforce these Canadian values. And I truly call upon you to make me again proud today as a parliamentarian, standing up for those values in defense of vulnerable minorities that are being trampled by tyranny and by authoritarian oppression. Thank you, colleagues, very much.
On debate, Senator Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I speak to you tonight from the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. This debate comes in a week in which the tragic discovery of yet more mass graves of 215 children in Kamloops adds to the indictment of our decades, no centuries-long practice of residential schools, forced sterilization, and what former Chief Justice of Canada described as cultural genocide of our Indigenous peoples. This horrifying reality of our history stands in rather cynical contrast to the tone of moral superiority and self-righteousness contained in the motion before us tonight. Colleagues, I rise to oppose the motion before us and would like to take a few minutes to explain why. In doing so, I would like to address the following issues: the purpose of the motion, the context in which we receive the motion, what does voting against this motion mean, and what is by this motion. In speaking to the purpose of this motion, I asked myself several questions to determine whether or not this was a motion I could speak to, because the issues are important. And the first question I asked, will this motion help the two Michaels? And colleagues, on reflection, I've come to the conclusion that it will not help, but rather significantly jeopardize the ongoing treatment of the two Michaels. If you read this morning's column by John Ivison in the National Post, Ivison states how he has changed his view on how Canada should address this issue of the two Michaels, and that it ultimately will involve a political solution. And I would argue, colleagues, as I believe that that is true, that a political solution will not be encouraged by motions such as the one before us. And I strongly urge us not to jeopardize the fragile situation involving the negotiations with regard to the two Michaels. The second question I posed to myself was, will this motion inflame or dampen anti-Asia violence in Canada? Like many senators, I share the concern of many senators and Canadians over the rise of anti-Asia violence in Canada generally, and particularly anti-China violence. And I believe it's incumbent upon us as a chamber of sober second thought to seek to dampen the rage that many are feeling, legitimate or otherwise. And we should not adopt motions which inflame the attitudes that are present in our society. Will this motion contribute to a better understanding of Canada's interests in engagement with China? No, this motion is about rage. It is about raising the serious situation of our fellow compatriots in certain regions of China. But frankly, it will not aid in our engagement of China on these issues or the broader context of these issues. This motion will not advance human rights in China, but rather lead to a clampdown and a negative reaction. And it is not the way in which I believe we can successfully engage China with regard to these practices and other issues of concern that we might have. Will this motion strengthen the ability of the Government of Canada to engage with the Government of China on bilateral and multilateral issues that are urgent for our attention? I believe, colleagues, that this motion will undermine such efforts at a time when the world has issues on which it must engage China that are important for multilateral issues, but also for the bilateral issues that Canada faces in the world of today. The motion before us suggests that the Olympics ought to be boycotted in China. And I would argue that this motion in this request makes the victims our athletes, the Olympic movement, and will do nothing to address the concerns that are quite heartfelt and raised in the motion. And it will undermine the polity of Olympic competition and victimize our athletes. There have been in question period and in this debate itself questions of the motivation of the Government of Canada the ability of the government of Canada to quote unquote stand up to China. Senator Husakos spoke of the motion before the other place, in which the executive of Canada did not support the motion, and some have speculated that that is out of weakness or out of a desire on the part of the government to not engage forcefully the people in the government of China. Colleagues, I believe that the motion before us will, if adopted, add to and significantly a deterioration of a relationship, the victims of which will not be senators, but rather the two Michaels, the ability of the communities in Canada to seek common ground and to distort our ability to speak to human rights issues with our Chinese interlocutors. Colleagues, we are living in perilous times. The post-war era of US dominance is being challenged, not in a Cold War redux, but rather the emergence of a near peer in China. This challenge to American exceptionalism comes at a particularly challenging time in the democratic life of our friends in the United States. I raise this context because surely our focus has to be how best to guide Canada's interest in the world of today and tomorrow. Simply stimulating public rage is not enough to move forward in our interests. We are in fevered times in our relationship with China on a wide range of issues, and the motion before us does not address how best to deal with those fevered times. Now, what does voting against this motion mean? Certainly for my part, it does not mean that the issues raised are not important and frankly ought not be raised with our interlocutors in China. I myself have raised them, would continue to raise them. I've raised them in the context even of the events in Kamloops today with Chinese officials. We need to find ways of engaging in a respectful fashion that demonstrates our commitment to the issues raised by Senator Husakos, but does not imperil our national interest and the well-being of Canadians. I would suggest that the Senate of Canada should deal with the issues raised in the motion and the broader context of Canada's relationships with China that I've raised, and do what we do best, and that is provide sober second thought and advice to a government of Canada in engaging in a study on what should our relationship with China, the evolving China, be in the months and years ahead. This could be a useful contribution to both public understanding and a government's contemplation of dealing with the changing circumstances to which I referred. I am particularly concerned with two developments taking place in the bilateral relationships between major powers in the world today, China and the United States. I fear strategic miscalculation on both parts, and I fear fevered political rhetoric which locks out the possibility of political compromise and cooperation on the issues on which we must make advances for the well-being of this planet and the relationships that are required to make progress on that. Former President Obama said it well when he said, "What is troubling is not the magnitude of our problems, but the smallness of our politics." Colleagues, let's not use this motion to emphasize the smallness of politics, but rather seek as a Senate to address the magnitude of our problems. Thank you.
Senator Husakos, your hand is raised.
Would Senator Harder take a question?
Senator Harder?
Certainly.
Senator Harder, you're absolutely right. Let's address the issues at hand. We have a Chinese regime that absolutely has no standards compared to Canada when it comes to labor. We have a Chinese regime that has no standards when it comes to environmental protection like Canada. We have a Chinese regime that has no respect for intellectual property, which we do in Canada. But fundamentally, we currently have, and you haven't addressed the issue, a regime that has millions of minority Muslims in concentration camps who are being tortured. And we have 2 Canadians that have been detained illegally for over 900 days. This is the issue at hand. So you haven't addressed them with your speech, other than, of course, giving us an explanation of why our government is in dialogue. So the question I have to you is, we've had now a current administration that has been in dialogue with the Chinese regime, continues to turn a blind eye to the egregious behavior I've highlighted, and many more. I can speak for hours. And can you please pinpoint any particular concrete result from that dialogue and the appeasement from our government from this Chinese regime that we've seen? Are the Michaels in any better shape today than they were 2 years ago? Are there Uyghur people in China suffering any less because of it? Is China all of a sudden willing to embrace some of the values and principles that we Canadians hold dear? And this institution called the Senate doesn't speak on behalf of the executive. We speak on behalf of Canadian and those values. But I would appreciate if you can give me examples, concrete examples, how dialogue has moved the yardsticks forward in getting this tyrannical regime to start behaving the way we expect of an ally and a trading partner.
Senator Housakos, I thank you for the question. I'm going to have to respond in a broader context than your question, because you've used words like appeasement and tyrannical regime and other descriptions of China, which, quite frankly, I find totally inappropriate for a context of seeking a broader engagement. The criticisms that you make are frankly not uniquely only in the reflection of one country. One could draw attention to any number of countries for which there are concerns with respect to human rights or international practices that you raise. I, for one, am not going to, on a public platform such as the Senate of Canada, seek to condemn at the very moment I'm seeking to engage. I do not see how, colleagues, we're going to get progress on climate action by insulting those that we wish to engage in stronger action. I do not see how we're going to see a stronger trading regime if we do not seek partners for WTO reform from the very sources of countries that we are, with this resolution and by the rhetoric of the question, condemning. I would also reference the fact that the actions being taken by some countries, I know in the dying days of the Trump administration, the then Secretary of State made certain comments on behalf of his government with respect to what he described as genocide, which the Biden administration is quite rightly reviewing, because they are not, they have not concluded that the 48 Convention standards have been met. My point in responding, Senator, is we should get off our high horse and seek to engage more appropriately and not bellicosely and belligerently with countries, not just China, but countries that we need to engage. And I'll leave it at that for tonight. Thank you.
Time has expired. We're moving to debate. Senator No.
Thank you, Madam Speakers. Honorable Senators, I rise today in support of Senator Housakos' motion to recognize the genocide that is being carried out by the People's Republic of China against Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims. I want to thank Senator Housakos for bringing this extremely important motion to the Senate. Colleague, the atrocity that have been happening for years now are so egregious, so disturbing in their moral depravity, so pervasive in scope that they encapsulate the very definition of genocide. The plight of the Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims has aptly been described by experts as the largest mass detention of an ethno-religious minority since the Holocaust. A nonpartisan think tank, the Newsline Institute for Strategy and Policy, in cooperation with the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, a leading human rights group with the contribution of more than 30 global experts and prominent human rights lawyers, published a report in March which undisputedly demonstrates that China is violating the United Nations Genocide Convention and committing genocide against Uyghurs. In February, in spite of the conspicuous and highly suspect absence of the Prime Minister and member of his cabinet, and a unanimous vote in the other place recognized that these heinous acts were perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party against Uyghur and other Turkish Muslims constitute genocide, making Canada the first country to do so after the United States. Satellite imagery, testimony from survivors, and leaked document Chinese government paint a bleak and horrifying pictures of orchestrated evil on the grand scale. An Orwellian mass state surveillance apparatus monitors their every move. Outspoken Uyghur leaders are killed. Mosques are sick and sacred sites are demolished. Children are separated from their parents and transferred to other parts of the country. Parents are separate from each other, arbitrarily rounded up, and forcibly detained in what the Chinese government, doublespeak, refer as re-education center. Survivors, however, are unequivocal in their assertion that these, in fact, concentration camps or Chinese gulag. Leaked in 2019, highly classified Chinese government document known as the China Cable confirmed the sinister nature of this camp, revealing the operation manual for mass internment and arrest by algorithm. Although figures vary, at least 2 to 3 million Uyghurs are estimated to have been incarcerated. Detainees are subject to systematic sexual abuse and torture, political indoctrination, forced sterilization, mandatory birth control, forced assimilation, and renunciation of their faith. Colleague, I really congratulate the Prime Minister for stating the obvious by accurately characterizing the act of genocide as extremely loaded. I think we can all agree with the Prime Minister when he says that such a serious allegation can only be attributed based on facts and evidence, and that it must be clearly and properly justified and demonstrated. However, what the Prime Minister and his cabinet refuse to acknowledge is that several credible bodies and leading experts have, in fact, already engaged in precisely this very process. It was through rigorous scrutiny of the extensive available evidence and compelling witness testimonies that they were able to conclude that the atrocities being perpetrated in Xinjiang do, in fact, constitute crimes against humanity and irrefutably amount to genocide. Colleague, the evidence is damning. So damning, in fact, that an array of government and non-government stakeholders worldwide have all declared that a genocide is taking place in Xinjiang. The list is extensive and include, in addition to the House of Commons Subcommittee on International Human Rights, no one but 2 consecutive U.S. administration, the Dutch Parliament, the UK Parliament, the Lithuanian Parliament, prominent think tanks, leading human rights groups, a coalition of more than 30 global experts, and prominent international human rights lawyers. Among them, the Honorable Irvin Cutler, former Liberal Minister of Justice and Attorney General, the Honorable Alan Rock, former Liberal Minister of Justice and former Canadian Ambassador to UN, the Honorable Lloyd Exworthy, former Liberal Minister of Foreign Affairs as well, as the Honorable Yves Fortier, renowned international lawyer, former Canadian Ambassador to the United Nations, and former President of United Nations Security Council. Colleague, if this list is not impressive enough, there's also our esteemed and heroic former colleague and retired Lieutenant General, the Honorable Romeo Dallaire, who, as you know, witnesses firsthand the Rwanda genocide. Amid tragic international indifference, he too called this a genocide and urged the government to act. Colleague, I am sadly not surprised by the spineless position adopted by the Prime Minister and his cabinet in their refusal to call this as a genocide, and as we have seen time and again, that they have clearly a policy of appeasement vis-à-vis China, in blatant disregard of sound expert advice, national security, and human rights. As Washington Post editorial board stated in its opinion published in May 16, titled China's Repression of Uyghur is not only cultural, but also physical, a new report shows, and I quote, after the Holocaust, the promise was never again. Either you believe it in never again, or you contributed to once again. End of quote. The message to the Prime Minister and his cabinet, and I quote the Romeo Dallaire, who rightly say, you are either a great nation that believes in its value and what its flag stands for, and what so many have died to defend it, you are either that or you are not. Indeed, it's time for the Trudeau government to do the right thing by recognizing that the heinous act perpetrated by CCP against the Uyghur constitute genocide. Call upon the International Olympic Committee to move 2022 Olympic Games if the Chinese government to continue this genocide and impose targeted Magnitsky sanction against all Chinese government officials responsible or complicit in perpetrating gross human rights violations. Canada has always been a front runner in fighting for democracy, freedom, and human rights and the rule of law, the very values on which this great nation was founded. Colleague, as the Chamber of the Second Thought, I believe with deep conviction that we have a moral duty to reaffirm this courageous and principled stance. Let us not be remembered for being subservient to cowardice, self-interest, and the almighty dollar. Let us stand on the right side of history and truly honor the pledge, never again. Honorable colleagues, let us not remain silent and lend our voice to calling this horrific 21st century tragedy for what it really is, a genocide. Thank you.
Senator Duncan?
Question.
I move the adjournment of the debate in my name.
Question.
Question.
I believe I was called
Question.
upon. Senator
Question.
Ringett, I believe you recognized me.
It is moved by the Honourable Senator Duncan, seconded by the Honourable Senator Wu, that further debate be adjourned to the next sitting of the Senate. If you are opposed to the motion, please say no. 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 Those in favor of the motion and who are in the Senate chamber, please say yay. Yay! Those opposed to the motion and who are in the Senate chamber will please say nay. Nay! I believe the nays have it. 2 senators rising, calling for a vote. No. We are voting now.
It has to be leave. It has to be leave. So it's,
We will have to ask a leave.
so it's senators in the chamber.
Want to vote now?
Well, we don't have to say in this, really. No, now it's as good as okay. Everybody's on the call. Nobody has to call.
For the proposed length of the bell from the senators in the Senate chamber. If you are opposed, please say no. So leave is granted. To vote now. Honourable Senator, the question is as follows. It was moved by the Honourable Senator Duncan, seconded by the Honourable Senator Wu, that debate be adjourned till the next sitting day. All those in favor of the motion who are yes?
Could you please repeat what we're voting on?
The adjournment of the debate.
Yes.
You want me to read again the adjournment of the debate?
No, but
Okay.
it's not what I understood, but that's fine, Your Honor.
Okay, we're all at the same page. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn the debate who are present in the Senate chamber will please rise.
The Honourable Senator Gold, PC. The Honourable Senator Daskal. The Honourable Senator Wu. The Honourable Senator Omadvar.
All those in favor of the motion who are participating by video conference will please hold up their cards.
The Honourable Senator Harder, PC. The Honourable Senator Duncan. The Honourable Senator Coyle. The Honourable Senator Bovey. L'Honorable Sénatrice Faray-Nissing. The Honourable Senator Klein. The Honourable Senator Cordy. The Honourable Senator Boniface. The Honourable Senator Griffin. The Honourable Senator Kutcher. L'Honorable Sénatrice Gagné. The Honourable Senator Bussin. L'Honorable Sénatrice Dupuis. The Honourable Senator Francis. L'Honorable Sénatrice Galvez. The Honourable Senator Down. L'Honorable Sénatrice Saint-Germain. The Honourable Senator Cotter. L'Honorable Sénatrice Petitclerc. L'Honorable Sénatrice Mégy.
The Honourable Senator Campbell. The Honourable Senator Bernard. The Honourable Senator O. The Honourable Senator Mercer. The Honourable Senator Deakin, Nova Scotia. The Honourable Senator Laboucan-Benson. L'Honorable Sénatrice Moncion. L'Honorable Sénateur Dagenet. L'Honorable Sénatrice Bellemare. L'Honorable Sénateur Cormier. The Honourable Senator Hartling. The Honourable Senator Wetston. The Honourable Senator McCullum. The Honourable Senator Lovelace Nicholas. The Honourable Senator Moody. The Honourable Senator Pate.
If a senator participating by video conference wishes to vote in favor of the motion and was not called by name, that senator should unmute his or her microphone now and state this. We're all good. All those opposed to the motion who are present in the Senate chamber will please rise.
The Honourable Senator Plett. The Honourable Senator Martin. The Honourable Senator Seidman. The Honourable Senator No. The Honourable Senator Batters. The Honourable Senator Wells. L'Honorable Sénateur Dalphond.
All those opposed to the motion who are participating by video conference will please hold up their cards.
L'Honorable Sénateur Oussakos. L'Honorable Sénateur Lefreda. The Honourable Senator Richards. The Honourable Senator Stuart Olson. The Honourable Senator Smith. The Honourable Senator Ravalia. The Honourable Senator Patterson. The Honourable Senator Atulajan. L'Honorable Senator Mockler. The Honourable Senator MacDonald. The Honourable Senator Manning. L'Honorable Sénatrice Miville-Dechaine. L'honorable sénateur Boisvenu. He's got his yes card up. Massicotte.
Sénateur Massicotte.
Il a sa carte de oui. Donc, est-ce qu'il va voter oui ou non? Yes.
Sénateur Massicotte. Sénateur Massicotte, je vous ai vu très brièvement avec une carte indiquant que vous vouliez voter non. Pourriez-vous confirmer, s'il vous plaît? Sénateur Massicotte. Okay, we'll do it. We'll do. Is he there? Okay, we'll do it this way. Si un sénateur participant par vidéoconférence souhaitait voter contre la motion et son nom n'a pas été appelé, ce sénateur devrait activer son microphone et le dire clairement.
Senator Tanis?
Senator Tanis? Is that you?
I want to vote no. Yeah.
The Honorable Senator Tanis.
Do we have any other senator that wishes to vote no and have not their name called?
Tell Senator Massicotte he's there. He had his hand up. We don't know how he wants to vote.
We asked Senator Massicotte.
Sénateur Massicotte, vous désirez voter oui ou non? Parce que vous aviez les deux cartes. Vous devez avoir la carte avec le X. Bon, voilà, Sénateur Massicotte, vous devez nous dire oui ou non.
Il a dit oui.
Non, on est dans les non.
On est dans les non. Sénateur Massicotte, est-ce que vous pourrez revenir en ligne, s'il vous plaît, pour quelques secondes, qu'on puisse clarifier la situation?
Vous êtes en sourdine.
OK. Maintenant?
Bon. Sénateur Massicotte, sur la motion d'ajournement, est-ce que vous désirez voter oui ou vous désirez voter non?
Oui.
Oui. Bon. Merci beaucoup.
You know, Your Honor, Senator Massicotte's vote makes no difference to the outcome of this. But on a point of order, he did not vote when the yeses were called. So I am asking that his vote not be counted in this vote. It makes no difference to the outcome, but we need to have proper rules here if we want to work in a virtual setting. And if we can't do that, then we shouldn't have a virtual setting.
Here.
I accept your point of order, Senator Platt, and because we had moved through all the yeses within the chamber, video conference, and those whose name had not been called. So therefore, Senator Massicotte, if you really want to vote on this, you will have to ask leave to register your vote in favor. If you wish to do that, please do it right now.
I'll pass.
vérifier voir s'il y a d'autres sénateurs qui donnent un non-vote.
Okay. Are there any other senators whose name have not been called? Okay. So far, so good. All those who wish to abstain, who are present in the Senate chamber, will please rise. All those who wish to abstain, who are participating by video conference, will please hold up their cards.
You haven't announced the vote yet, had you?
No, no.
The Honourable Senator Simons. The Honourable Senator Anderson.
So 25 minutes later?
If a senator participating by video conference wishes to abstain and was not called by name, that senator should unmute his or her microphone now and state this.
Count. Nays count 21, 21. Abstentions, abstention 2, 2.
The motion is adopted.
The